Hey guys, welcome back to Kids Worship. I'm glad that you're joining us again today. My name's Krista and I'm the Director of Kids Ministries here at North Haven. And we have been talking on our Sunday mornings about stories of Paul from the book of Acts. And so Miss Julia has our story for us again today about a time when Paul was shipwrecked. So we will have our worship song and then hear Miss Julia tell the story. Thanks again for joining us. See you soon.
My God is strong. He'll do anything big or small. Nothing is impossible for a super wonderful God. Every day I can know God is always there for me and my family. Every day I can know greater is the one who lives inside me. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Our God is strong. He'll do anything big or small. Nothing is impossible for a super wonderful God. Every day I can know God is always there for me and my family. Yeah, every day I can know greater is the one who lives inside me. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God.
Hey guys, I'm telling this week's story in the dark because a lot of this story takes place in the dark. So remember how Paul the other week got let down out of the city in a basket because the Jews were trying to kill him? Well, it didn't stop there. Paul he went on many missionary journeys. He went to Jerusalem to try to convince the Jews there that Jesus is who he said he was. And the Jews, when they saw him in the temple, got so angry at him and so upset just that he was even there that they started a mob scene. They started running after him and accusing him of all these things he didn't do, and they started even beating him up. They drug him out of the temple and started beating him until the giant crowd was about ready to kill him. Well, the Romans heard all the ruckus and they were in charge of the city. So they came and broke up the fight, and they grabbed Paul, and they asked what he had done, but they couldn't get a straight answer. So they put Paul in chains and drug him off. Well, he couldn't get a fair trial there because the Jews wanted to kill him so bad that they were ready to kill him in secret even before he could get a trial for the things he hadn't done wrong. So Paul said, I want to stand trial before the emperor in Rome because I'm a Roman citizen. Rome was a far way away, and Caesar, the emperor there, was in charge of the whole empire. Well, the only way to get there was by ship. So Paul ends up on a ship bound for Rome. Now, Paul's been on ships before. He's even been shipwrecked before on some of his missionary journeys. So he gets on this ship, and it's a big ship. When I first read the story, I was imagining a small boat, but when I read about it, this ship was probably about 140 feet long, and so that's bigger than my house, and it carried 276 people aboard it, many of them prisoners. Remember, Paul's going to Rome as a prisoner. He's got a guard named Julius, not Julia, Julius. He's a Roman centurion. He's a high-ranking guard, and there's a bunch of other guards and prisoners on board as well. And the ship itself is carrying a load of wheat to Rome. Tons, literal tons and tons of wheat. They get on the ship, they start on their journey, and things aren't going very well. Even at first, they're slowed down, the winds are going wrong, they can't go the way they want. It's taking too long. They end up on the Isle of Crete. And Paul says to the ship's crew and to the centurion, he says, this is not going to end up well if we keep going. We need to spend the winter here, you guys. It's late September, early October. Sailing gets super dangerous and even impossible in the winter. If we try to keep going, this is going to end in disaster. But they were in a tiny town, not the perfect place to spend the winter. And maybe the sailors and crew kind of didn't want to get stuck in a podunk little town. They said, we're going to sail to the next port. It's only 30, 40 miles away. Only take us one day to get there. It's a little bit bigger, nicer place. We'll spend the winter there. So they start sailing. The wind is blowing gently in the way they want to go when they start out. But before long, a huge storm blows up because it's, just like Paul said, it's a dangerous time of year for sailing. So the wind starts blowing them way off course. And the ship they're in is huge, but the only way it can travel is through the wind and their sails. And their sail was one huge square. They couldn't turn it. They couldn't move it. There's no motor. They can't do anything to get where they want to go. The only thing they could do was put the sail down, put the anchor down to try to slow the ship from blowing in the wind, and just let the ship go where the wind and the raging storm started blowing it. Well, the storm was fierce. It blew them so hard that it was black outside. They couldn't see the sun during the day. They couldn't see the stars at night. And that is really bad news if you're an ancient sailor, because there's no GPS. There's not even a compass. The only way you know where you're at is the stars or the sun. The storm is tossing the ship. Imagine you're on a ship with about 300 people, the size of your house, and it is like you're in your house, but you're on deck, and it's dark, and the wind is tossing, and this giant ship is going up and down, and you're thinking this might tip over, and you don't know where you're at, and even the experienced sailors are just terrified. This went on for days. They tried to do anything they could to make the ship safer. It was heavy from all the cargo, so they started throwing the grain and the cargo off the side of the ship. This was worth a lot of money when they got where they were going, but they knew they needed to do something. They were throwing tons and tons of grain off the ship. They even took one of the big masts. It took the whole crew, and they threw that off the side of the ship, the size of a tree, you guys. And it still, they were just stuck. Paul got up on the ship's deck after this had been going on for many days and said, listen, an angel came and sat next to me last night. And so don't worry. He said, Paul, don't be afraid. Remember how that's one of the first things angels usually say, don't be afraid, which I love that. Don't be afraid. God wants you to go to Rome and stand trial in front of the emperor. You're going to make it, and God is gracious. He's going to let everybody else on the ship make it too. The ships will be destroyed, but you guys will be safe. So they kept going in the night, but it just kept going for days and days. Pretty soon it had been 14 days. They were stuck in the storm night and day. And then they heard a sound. It was the sound of waves hitting land. Now, they thought they were out in the middle of nowhere, and they kind of were. They were near a small island. Now, land is great news if you're stuck at sea, but the problem was this was in the middle of the night. It's dark from the storm, and they can't see a thing. And if you are in a big ship like that and you don't do it properly, you will get smashed against the rocks and everyone will die. So they took 4 big heavy anchors off the back of the ship, threw them in the ocean on ropes to try to keep the ship where it was from crashing against the rocks, and they prayed for daylight to come so they could see where they were going and land the ship properly. But they weren't so sure they could do it. The crew, the sailors, got talking. They said, let's get out of here. We'll just take the lifeboat and forget these guys. We're just going to get on the lifeboat and get to shore. And if they die, whatever. So they pretended they were letting down another anchor, but they were really lowering the lifeboat into the water. They were about to hop in and take off. And Paul saw what they were doing. He went to Julius, the centurion, the Roman guard that was guarding him. Remember, he was a prisoner. And he said, if these guys leave, there's no hope for us. They are the only ones that know how to sail the ship. You can't let them leave if you want to get off here alive. So the Roman soldier listened to Paul, and he cut the ropes off the lifeboat so the sailors couldn't leave them alone on the ship and strand them there. Before dawn, Paul spoke to the crew again. He said, listen, God has promised us, even though the ship's going to crash, we are going to be okay. You guys, not a single hair on your heads is going to be hurt from this. But you guys have been so caught up in all the suspense of the storm, you haven't even eaten for almost 2 weeks. He made everyone sit down and eat. He said, thank you to God for the bread that he had. He broke it and he started eating, and everyone was encouraged by what Paul said. And after they'd eaten, it became dawn and they could see the shore. One problem. A bunch of these people were prisoners and their guards were there, and they can't swim to shore with chains on them. Well, they're going to try to sail the ship to shore first, so they cut off the lines to those anchors. They left the anchors in the ocean, and the ship started sailing towards the shore. By the way, archaeologists found 4 anchors right off the coast of where they think that ship landed, and they're from the Roman era. They might be the same ones off of the ship. They're in a museum in Malta. Anyway, they cut off the anchors. The ship starts going into shore, but before they get there, it gets stuck on an underwater sandbar. The storm is still going. The waves are still crashing. The front of the ship won't move, and the waves are hitting so hard that the back of the ship is starting to break into pieces. So the Roman soldiers are thinking, if we let the prisoners out of their chains, they're going to swim away and then run, and then we'll get punished in their place. If you were a Roman soldier, you could get punished in your person's place if you let them get away. So they decided to kill the prisoners, all of them. But Julius liked Paul, and he didn't want to see him die like that. He said, no, we're not going to do that. Everyone swim. So everyone who could swim swam to shore. Everyone who couldn't grabbed onto a piece of wreckage from the ship. And every single one of those 276 people made it to shore. That is not what typically would have happened. God let them make it to shore. I have 3 questions for you real quick about this story, and I'm getting kind of long on my time, so I'm going to ask them fast. 1, why do you think God let Paul go through all of that craziness and shipwreck and the storm? I mean, that was terrible. He could have stopped the storm, right? Jesus, when he was on earth, he told the winds and waves just to be quiet, and they stopped. So why would, and God told Paul to go to Rome. Paul was doing what God wanted him to do. Why do you think God let that happen to him? There's no easy answer to that, by the way. 2, what do you think we're supposed to learn from this story? Why is this today's story? What do you think God wants you to learn from this story? What do you think he wants me to learn from this story? Which, by the way, those things might be different because we're different. And 3, what do you think happens next? 3 actually has a good answer. You can look in, if you want to find out what happens next, which is also crazy, look in Acts 28, the next chapter of Paul's journey. It involves a bonfire and a snake. So you can look that up. But talk with your grown-ups about 1 and 2 as well. I wish I could hear what you guys have to say. I always learn from you. So if you want to email me or put you have your parents text me or put it on the commentary if there's comments on this video, whatever. That's not the important part. Talk about it with your grown-ups though, because this is really interesting to think about. I miss you guys. And I'm praying for you and I'm thankful for you. Bye.